One of my favorite podcasts these days, it's not even a Catholic podcast, it's a podcast about movies, and it's called The Rewatchables. And basically it's called The Rewatchables because they pick these movies that they deem to be of certain quality and therefore rewatchable. So one particular episode, they were talking about that movie Big, starring Tom Hanks. I'm sure everyone's seen it. 1988. Simple plot. There's this kid, he's 12 years old, he makes a wish, becomes big. That's the plot, right? So he becomes this adult in his 30s. And the question was asked during the podcast, like, hey, what's everyone's favorite scene from that Tom Hanks movie Big? And everyone pretty much gave the same answer. If you've seen the movie, this is probably your favorite scene too. It's a scene where Tom Hanks, his character, is in a toy store, along with his future boss, and they're playing the piano with their feet, right? So it's this toy piano, huge keys, black and white, it's on the floor, and you play the piano by dancing on the keys. Super cool, really famous scene. But what's interesting is that everyone who said that was my favorite scene, they confessed they had mixed feelings. So on the one hand, fantastic scene. Production value, creativity, the way it hits all those narrative beats, fantastic, classic, iconic scene. So 100%. Also, it touches on something in terms of my childhood, right? Oh, it's beautiful. It reminds me of when I was a kid, when I used to play with toys and be carefree and all these different things. But on the other hand, all these different people said, I also felt this deep sense of sadness when I watched that scene. A deep sense of lament. I lament the loss of my childhood. There was a time when I had the capacity for wonder, when I had the capacity to be carefree, when I had the capacity to be lost in the moment. But then I got older. I got responsibilities, and now I'm just worried and afraid all the time. I don't like that. And I watch this scene, and I feel something tugging on my heartstrings, but it makes me feel sad. And what's interesting is that the conversation stopped there, just when it was getting interesting. The thing about the parable of the sower, the Lord is saying to us, even though there is a bit of a learning curve to recover a sense of childhood sensibility and spiritual childhood, however you want to frame it, it is possible to regain all those things that perhaps you lost many years ago. That's why it's really important to be attentive to these different temptations, represented by the path and the thorns and the rocky ground. The Lord is steering us in the right path and showing us again, it is possible to see with your eyes, to listen with your ears, to understand with your heart, so that you might recognize the Lord and turn to Him and thereby be healed. Peace and joy and happiness and freedom, all these things which are the fruits of coming back into right relationship with God.